Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, flower pot men, flower pot men, flower pot men, Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, flower pot men.
Once upon a time, there was a little house. And all round the house was a beautiful garden. And down at the bottom of the garden was a place where the man who worked in the garden left his things while he went into the house to have his dinner. One day, when he'd gone into the house to have his dinner, he left behind his little trowel, his big watering can, a string of onions, and a whole lot of cabbages and sprouts he'd been cutting that morning. And there were the flower pots, as they always were. 2 middle-sized ones, 2 little ones, and 2 great big ones. And just behind the big flower pots was a little weed. Weed! Weed! And there they all were, lying quietly in the warm sunshine. The little weed looked all about her, and when she saw that everything was quiet, she knocked gently on one of the big flower pots and said, "Weed! Weed!" Then the first flower pot man knew it was time to pop up. He leaned over and said, which was the flower pot way of saying, "Hello, little weed, I'm the first flower pot man to pop up." The little weed laughed. "Weed! Weed!" Then she knocked gently on the other big flower pot. "Weed! Weed!" But there was no answer.
Oh.
The little weed knocked again. But there was still no answer, and the other little flower pot man didn't come up. Then the first flower pot man leaned over to see why his friend didn't come up, but there was nobody there.
Oh, da da ba ba ba, floppa pop pop, ba ba woo.
Then he asked the little weed if she'd seen him.
Oh, hobba bop, floppa pop pop.
Weed!
Oh. In the roll of bottle drop, a color of a bottle, what the boy beat.
He looked everywhere for the other flower pot man. He even looked in his own flower pot. He wasn't there.
No.
Then he looked in the other flower pot. He wasn't there either.
Nope, nope, nope.
Then he looked in the hole where the hens run in and out. He wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere.
No, not the other.
Then he started calling.
Flop-a-pop-bop, wah-wah-woo.
At last he came to the big watering can, and he thought perhaps he might be there. So he stopped and called down the spout, in his flower pot way of talking. "Is anybody there?"
No. Oh.
Of course, the first flower pot man knew he was there because he heard him talking.
Oh, you want to follow a crop? No. No. Oh. Oh. Follow a crop? No. Oh. Oh. Oh, come on, Bob.
Then they began playing about on the watering can.
Oh.
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 Oh dear, one of them fell in.
Oh, come up. Oh, don't fall. Oh, come. Oh, no, don't fall on the top.
Up. Then the flower pot men thought they'd like to play horses. One could be the horse, and the other could be the driver.
Oh, beep up, flop, beep up, wop up.
All up. Oh.
Chop, chop, chop. Come up, hurry up.
But they didn't get on very fast, and they wondered if they could find something that went faster. The watering can was a very nice horse to ride on, but it didn't go fast at all. It was even slower than their old friend Slowcoach the tortoise.
Oh, slug-a-dog, slug-a-lug.
Slug-a-lug.
So they looked about to find something else to ride on. And they saw those cabbages and sprouts that I told you about. The ones the man who works in the garden had left there when he went into the house to have his dinner. They looked at the sprouts first, but they didn't think they could ride on them because they were far too small to go fast.
No, not too small.
Beep-up.
No, not gonna pop.
Beep-up.
No, up deep, yubble.
When the little sprouts heard what the flower pot men said, they were very angry, and they jumped up and hurried away, just to show the flower pot men how fast they could run. Then one of the flower pot men said, "What about these cabbages? We could ride on them."
Oh, clubble-up.
Lep clubble. Hop-de-bop.
No, hop-de-bop.
No, hop-de-bop.
No, hop-de-bop.
No, hop-de-bop.
Oh, hop-de-bop.
When they had decided who was to have which one, they got on their cabbages and settled themselves down. Then they began to jiggle up and down and say, gee up, in their funny flower pot way of talking.
Oh, chup.
Chip.
They jigged about so much that the cabbages began to bounce. First, tiny little bounces.
Oh.
Then, bigger bounces.
Oh.
And then they bounced higher and higher and higher and higher. They were so busy bouncing up and down on their cabbages that they didn't see that the little sprouts were dancing behind them, copying all they did and doing it all just as fast and just as well. Then one of the flower pot men bounced so high that he bounced right away. The other one went on playing.
Roll.
But because he wasn't looking what he was doing, he fell off. And while he was busy picking himself up, the naughty little sprouts came, and they pushed and pushed And at last they pushed the cabbage right away. When the flower pot man turned round to look, it wasn't there.
Oh, wat my club up. Eep gob.
And he wondered where it had gone.
Oh, about club up club. Oh, more oddlodle.
And he wondered and wondered and wondered what had happened to the cabbage. He couldn't think where it had gone. He knew the other flower pot man hadn't taken it because he wasn't there. He couldn't think how it had happened at all. And while he was looking for it, the little sprouts pushed the cabbage back again. Then they ran back and jumped into the basket as fast as they could. But the flower pot man didn't know this because he wasn't looking. Now, all this time, the little weed was watching, and she had seen which one had lost his cabbage. You listen, because the little weed is going to ask a question.
Was it Bill or was it Ben? Lost his fine big cabbage then. Which of these two flower pot men? Was it Bill or was it Ben?
Do you know which one it was? You listen again.
Was it Bill or was it Ben? Lost his fine big cabbage then. Which of these two flower pot men? Was it Bill or was it Ben?
Well, was it Ben or was it Bill? It was Bill. It was Bill. And while he was still looking, his friend came back and asked what was the matter. And he told him he'd lost his cabbage. Couldn't find it anywhere.
Palapa club up. Cup flat up.
Klop, flop op. Wat dat die? Lo.
Oh, oh. Mama. Patata di patata. Patata patata. Patata patata. Patata patata. Patata.
Slop, klop, klop.
So the first flower pot man got back onto his cabbage and they had another ride. And while they were still playing, they heard the little weed calling.
Do, blobble, blobble, blobble.
Oh, blubble.
She was telling them to hurry because the man who digs the garden had finished his dinner and she heard him coming down the garden path. So they got off their cabbages and hurried back to their flower pots so they could climb in again.
Oh.
Oh, hey-oh.
Then they said goodbye to each other.
Bob. Bob.
Bow-wop.
Bob.
Bow-wop.
Then they said goodbye to the little weed.
Bawa, odo, weep.
Weed. Bow-wop. Ata. Weep. Weed.
The little weed stayed behind the flower pots and went fast asleep. And there they all were in the warm sunshine. But the man who worked in the garden didn't know that anything had happened at all. Nobody knew about the flower pot men. Only you saw them playing. And the little weed. And I think the little house knew something about it. Don't you?
Goodbye, Bill, goodbye, Ben. Bill and Ben, flower pot men. Goodbye, Bill, goodbye, Ben. Bill and Ben, flower pot men.